I'm Ashley Salvador, City Councillor for Ward Métis. I'm really looking forward to spending the next hour or so with you.
Thanks so much
as
for
we
joining
cover
me
off
tonight
some
for our
recent
monthly
City Council
community
decisions,
conversation.
look at some
I'm Ashley
ward-specific
Salvador,
items,
City Councillor
and
for
also
Ward.
look ahead to a few items that are going to be coming down the line. So first, I want to start off by acknowledging the traditional land on which we reside is in Treaty 6 territory. I'd like to thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as Cree, Dene, Anishinaabe, Saulteaux, Nakota Iska, Nakota Sioux, and Blackfoot peoples. We also acknowledge this as the Métis homeland and the home of one of the largest communities of Inuit south of the 60th parallel. It's a welcoming place for all peoples who come from around the world to share Edmonton as home. And I'm grateful that my family and I have been afforded the opportunity to build a life here. Together, we call upon all of our collective honored traditions and spirits to work in building a great city for today and future generations. So again, welcome everybody to our community conversation. Just to start off, as a reminder, if you haven't joined us before, feel free throughout the night to put your questions below in the comments, ask any question you may have, and we'll try to get to all of them either throughout the night, or if we don't have that opportunity, we'll go back and make sure we get to every single one of them and try to answer as best as possible. I also want to introduce you, if you have not met him yet, to Mike, who will be moderating the comment section. Mike is my senior council assistant. Hi, Mike.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good. Yourself?
Oh, pretty good.
I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. And Mike is helping produce all of these virtual community conversations and is going to be guiding us through the tech side of tonight. So super grateful to have Mike on board. And, you know, we keep these conversations pretty casual and conversational. So sometimes Mike pops on and we have a chat too. So stay tuned for that. All right. So tonight, I'm thinking that we're just going to hop right into it, because we have a pretty full agenda and list of items that I wanted to get through and share with everybody. And I'm going to start off with the 50th Street grade separation. Okay, so this is a project that most folks in Ward Métis, I would say most folks in Edmonton should be aware of at this point. And I'll get into a bit of the background on what the project is in a second. But the reason that I wanted to bring this up is because on Monday, Council received a capital budget update, which indicated that several of our capital projects have experienced budget increases and are over budget, including the 50th Street grade separation. And again, this has been a project that is top of mind for many folks living in Ward Métis for years. So some background on the project, and you can see some of the renderings on the screen now. This project, the planning was actually completed back in 2010, and in 2017, the project was proposed to our federal and provincial partners as an $86 million grade separation. And the whole reason behind this grade separation, essentially, if you haven't seen it or you're not familiar with it, there is a at-grade rail crossing, and there's about 35,000 vehicles that travel this crossing per day. It gets backed up pretty badly. And it's absolutely a frustration point for a lot of Edmontonians, for a lot of commuters. But also importantly, this route is actually a really important industrial corridor. So there's a lot of industrial traffic, a lot of economic activity in this portion of our city. So to have those types of delays, there's huge economic consequences as well. So again, this project dates back to about 2010, and quite recently at the fall budget adjustment, Council was informed that there was another cost increase from that initial 86 million. The cost had increased from that to 103 million up to 145 million. And then this week on Monday, we've found out that it had increased up to $179 million. So of course, this was very concerning whenever you see that type of cost increase and that type of cost escalation. And I'll talk a little bit about why that occurred, because it's not typical to see that dramatic of increases for a project like this. And what we learned, and through the discussion and in conversations with administration, There were several compounding factors that contributed to that cost increase. So the pandemic, of course, and supply chain issues associated with that. Also issues associated with transportation of materials from BC because of some flooding last year. There's infrastructure stimulus going on in the United States, and that's actually drawing contractors elsewhere. And global commodity prices have risen quite dramatically. International conflict also played a significant role in this. And just for example, nickel, it's increased in price by over 300%. And part of that's because Russia is the largest producer of nickel in the world. So all of these factors compounded on top of one another led to that rather dramatic increase in price. And I'll be honest, I struggled with this increase. On the one hand, I absolutely understand how important this piece of infrastructure is, not only for community members, but for that industrial area. At the same time, I try to not view projects in isolation. I want to know, okay, if we're experiencing this type of escalation, are other projects, other capital projects that are on the books, are they going to experience similar increases as well? So really trying to take that broad view, and city admin is going to be coming back with that broad view so that council can have that larger discussion. But in the interim, myself, as well as all of my council colleagues, decided to move ahead with this project. Again, recognizing that if we don't say yes now, we could incur additional increases. A really critical part of this conversation is that the federal and provincial funding that's tied to this project would actually be placed at risk if we weren't to move ahead at this time. And that's largely due to the fact that the construction tender expires on April 8th. So the window of decision here was quite short. So in order to retain our partnered funding, in order to get this project through and finally built, we did say yes to those increases. But yeah, like I said, this does bring to my mind that larger conversation about the state of our capital projects. And I think that moving forward, it's going to be really critical to ground all of those conversations in responsible fiscal policy, just to make sure that, we're managing our debt limit, that we're still able to invest in projects that are ultimately going to help us become a more attractive, competitive, climate resilient city as well. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a recap. And it looks like Mike's been running through a few photos of the renderings of the project as well. And I will say we actually just put out a blog on this particular topic as well. So that's up on our website if you're interested in diving into some more details associated with that. And just the last thing I will mention, again, there's a lot more detail from the blog, but another factor that played into this decision is that there's the possibility that the federal government does come in to top this project up. And if that does happen, the city's contribution would be far less. So, we're very hopeful that that does come through, because that would make this project and that cost increase a lot easier to swallow. Okay. Okay, sounds good. All right, so next we're going to move on to the Ride Transit and Leisure Access Program expansion. So this was actually a really exciting motion that Councillor Knack brought forward. And I wanted to touch on it because it didn't get too much coverage, but I thought it was really important because, one of my priorities, I know it's a priority for folks in Ward Métis, is making sure that everybody has equitable access to public transit, as well as equitable access to our rec facilities and leisure. So if you're not familiar with the Leisure Access Program or the Ride Transit Program, they essentially provide eligible low-income Edmontonians the ability to participate at our rec facilities, but also the ability to have subsidized transit passes for both adult and youth. So really critical program. And what the motion asks administration to do is to look at how we could expand that. Because right now, the program essentially has two tiers, and that's based on the low income cutoff. And we're looking to potentially add another tier. So looking to expand that eligibility. And the reason behind that is quite simple. Some families, they discover that if they earn $1 over the cutoff, then they become completely cut off from their eligibility, cut off from transit or rec center support that their whole family might use. So again, it's providing that greater degree of flexibility to make sure that Edmontonians who need that little bit of additional support have it. So looking forward to that coming back in front of us, and that's scheduled back for June 27th. Okay. How are we doing, Mike? I can't see the comments just yet, so you'll have to give me a bump if there's any relevant questions.
Well, actually, even just while we're still kind of close to where, with the 50th Street overpass there, Kevin just had a question about.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Is the city going to be reviewing how capital projects / infrastructure is managed going forward in regards to the numerous cost overruns the last few years on the LRT and other projects?
So that's a great question. And I'll kind of frame it in the context of 50th Street too, because I think they're really good comparisons. Now there's something called PDDM is the acronym, and it's our approach to project management. And 50th Street was actually not part of that system of project management. So it's considered kind of a legacy project. So Edmonton did review its approach to capital project management to make sure that we are delivering projects in the most efficient, timely, and cost-effective manner for Edmontonians. But this particular project came before that. So one thing I always like to remind people of, and again, this stuff doesn't make the headlines, but the vast majority of our projects that are city-led are on time and on budget. And we actually got an update on that about 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago or so. But again, it's not look at this massive piece of infrastructure that's way over budget. So it doesn't make the news. But your example of the LRT, I will say, is an interesting one, because that was done as a P3. So it's not solely the city. You're probably familiar with TransEd. That's the group that is carrying out the build of the LRT line. And that is why we've seen some pretty significant delays. I think one of the things I would always reiterate when it comes to the LRT is that Edmontonians and our investment is protected. So even though the project's being delayed, I'll put this as TransEd is the one who will feel the repercussions of that delay. So again, our investment is protected, but they're feeling those consequences. So hopefully that makes sense. But I will say, under the new PDDM model for project management, things have been going really well. And I'd be happy to share some additional information and reports on that, particularly the one that we received about 2 weeks ago, because there's some really good graphs in there as well that really shows how effective this model is at delivering projects on time and on budget. And I think there was a question about, was there a question around 6 lanes for 50th Street?
Yeah. So actually, and then I just popped back up some of the renderings here, because I feel like definitely the grade separation comes into account when we're talking about active transportation and stuff as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And
yeah, sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's a really great question around 6 lanes, and it actually came up at council. One of my colleagues asked about that. And I was also curious because, oftentimes I find that we are really building to the max when it comes to our infrastructure, our auto infrastructure in particular. And I would argue that sometimes we're overbuilding our auto infrastructure. And when it came to 50th Street, it was actually deemed necessary by our provincial and federal funding partners to go all the way to 6 lanes. So although that would not have been my preference, and this was a decision far before my time, the funding is actually tied to that 6 lane design. So that's the reason for the very large, very, very wide grade separation. And Mike, just to your point around active transportation, I will say that there is a shared use path on one side and a sidewalk on the other side. So that was incorporated into the project. I will say that in general, this area doesn't have great active transportation connectivity. Whenever we're doing a large scale project like this, I think it's important to look beyond just that scope of the project. It might be great to be able to safely bike on a shared use path while you're going across this particular grade separation piece of infrastructure, but what's on either side, right? Is it actually safe to get there? So thinking of our active transportation network in a more holistic manner is really important when it comes to these conversations.
Perfect. And then there's one other one about the 50th Street overpass here, or the grade separation, from Daniel. With the rail crossing, is there any consideration for soundproofing for residents on the northwest side of the proposed development?
That is a great question. I believe the answer is yes. I don't have details on that, but it's a great question, and I can look into that for you, Daniel. But I know that when I was door knocking in this particular area, that did come up a lot. But I would assume yes. But let me get a firm answer for you, and we'll put it in the chat once we find that. Okay.
And then also, I think, to my understanding as well, that actually the grade separation itself actually helps protect the sound from the rail yard with those. I forget who we were talking to, but I definitely remember that point coming up as well.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
Yeah.
That could very likely be the case. But again, I can, by no means am I an engineer when it comes to things like soundproofing, but we can get that. Awesome. Any other ones before we move on?
Perfect. Well, let's move on, and then we can answer some at the end.
Great. Sounds good.
Perfect.
So now I think a number of folks might be here for this reason. So I wanted to cover this fairly soon, near the top of our conversation tonight, and that's around the aerial mosquito program. Now I know that this has caused quite a stir, and rightly so. I understand that concern. So I wanted to take some time to explain, what exactly was decided by council, what implications that decision has, and hopefully dispel some of the, misconceptions that are out there. Because I have heard some folks saying that we've completely, canceled all of our mosquito control measures, and that we are not going to be managing mosquitoes and pests at all. And that is not the case. So I just want to be really clear that we have not stopped our mosquito management, but we have decided to not move ahead with the aerial mosquito program. So Mike has, great, thank you, Mike. You have the picture of the helicopter up. Now, if you're not familiar with the aerial mosquito program, which essentially involves flying a helicopter into surrounding areas outside the city, and we'll put a map up for that as well. I think that's just one. Yeah, great. So you can kind of see that it's not actually within the city. It kind of goes to the outskirts. And we essentially take larvicide and, relatively indiscriminately spray from the helicopter into sloughs, bodies of water in the surrounding kind of periphery of the city. So that is what council decided to forego. But I did want to say that just because we have said no to that doesn't mean we're going to be doing no mosquito management. So we still have crews that drive around in trucks applying larvicide to standing bodies of water. We have some photos of that as well. You'll see them typically they're wearing backpacks with the larvicide. So we're still maintaining that program. It's $650,000 for ground and ditch mosquito management. So again, what we've limited is the helicopter portion, but not the ground and ditch mosquito management. And, for me, I think that the ground and ditch program, the ground operations, I do think it's a rather responsible and targeted approach that's still going to have a positive impact and sort of control some of the concerns that Edmontonians are worried about when it comes to mosquitoes. At the same time, I myself and a number of colleagues did not feel that the more indiscriminate aerial spraying was in line with some of our ecological goals, our goals around biodiversity. So again, it's not about foregoing the management of pests. It's about doing it in a smarter way, in a more ecologically sensitive way, but still effective way. So hopefully that makes sense. I think we have just a few more photos on this one as well. Yeah, great. And that's just an example of some of the sort of outlying little bodies of water, sloughs, that the helicopter program would typically cover. Great. Yeah, and just to elaborate a little bit more on the approach, and some of the sustainability goals of our city, when I think about the helicopter program in particular and the larvicide that is used, it doesn't distinguish between mosquito larvae or other larvae, which does mean that all of the insects that fill that particular trophic level and other members of the food web that feed on those, they don't survive either. So we have heard that not only are we in a climate crisis, but we are in a biodiversity crisis as well. So this could have impacts on birds, butterflies, more critters, life in our city, which I do think is important. So again, I do understand that there might be some of that short-term pain, as the predators that would typically have eaten the hatched larva have no food, or they have had no food for many years. But as we approach kind of a closer equilibrium, we may start to find that there is an acceptable level of mosquitoes. So when it comes to this season, we are still managing pests, we are still managing mosquitoes, but there will be some education campaigns around what you can do on your own individual properties to reduce standing water and take those types of more easy individual measures. So I don't actually see too many questions in particular about mosquito spraying yet. Maybe they're coming, Mike. Do you see any? I mean, that's okay. If they come in, we can.
Will the mosquito management? Sorry, this is from Kevin. Will the mosquito management be reviewed if this appears to be not as effective without the aerial or spraying? Mosquitoes have been a huge problem, especially with the hot weather last year, making being outside very difficult.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that, as we make these types of changes and as we sort of evolve our approach to mosquito management, there has to be that ongoing evaluation. It has to be an iterative process so that we can course correct and ensure that we're sort of seeing the desirable outcomes that we would expect from this type of change. So yes, I would fully expect to see that.
Perfect. Well, yeah, let's move on to single-use item reduction
Great.
strategy. And thank you, Chris, for posting that PDF about the railway crossing. That just goes to a little bit of a question and answer about the 50th Street widening and railway crossing. If anybody wants to, feel free to click on that.
Oh, perfect. That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Chris. Okay, so we're going to move on to something that is quite exciting for me. I sit on the utility committee for City Council, and about 2 weeks ago, utility committee was presented with our new single-use item reduction strategy. So this strategy is part of our larger strategy. It's the 25-year waste strategy, which essentially looks to get the city to about a 90% waste diversion rate. So quite exciting goals, quite ambitious goals, and things like the single-use item reduction strategy can help us get there. So the strategy proposed, I think, is really reasonable, quite well considered and practical for making progress on this important issue. One thing that stuck out to me that I wanted to share with folks is just the kind of staggering statistics associated with single-use items. So in the report, it was shared that 450 million single-use items weighing about 10,000 tons is what we are producing. I found that quite extensive. And again, recognizing that our end goal, and as we move towards a more sustainable city, is to reduce the amount of single-use items we're seeing in our communities. It actually becomes more apparent at this time of year, I find. As the snow starts to melt, you start to see litter, coffee cups, plastic bags hanging out on fences in your neighborhood. So this is part of becoming that environmentally conscious city. And I guess one of the things we can point out, Mike, do we want to throw up that table? Yeah, great. So this table just shows some of the items that are part of the strategy. So things like shopping bags, foodware accessories, so utensils, straws, stirrers and splash sticks, as well as styrofoam food serviceware and other disposable cups. Those would be regulated by the bylaw. And then there's some other voluntary actions that are included as well. So right now, of course, the city is taking kind of an incremental approach to implementation, making sure that businesses and industry are prepared and able to make this transition. So again, really excited about it. There was actually a 2019, I believe, engagement phase that showed the majority of Edmontonians, both residents and businesses, supported the elimination, restriction, or addition of fees on styrofoam, straws, and plastic checkout bags. So really good to see that there's widespread support for this within the city of Edmonton. And ultimately, this is going to move us towards a more environmentally conscious future where we can divert waste, reduce our environmental footprint, and start to see that circular economy in action. Great. Okay. And any other ones coming in before we jump to naturalization of boulevards and turf and boulevardening, which is a fun one.
Boulevardening is amazing. No, let's just move straight on.
Okay, sounds good. So one of the other things that we heard about earlier this week was naturalization of boulevards and turf. So as some of you may know, the city has actually been undertaking naturalization efforts for quite a long time, typically along roadways, near stormwater ponds, park spaces, and in new developing communities. And recently, Council received a report on alternative landscaping options for turfs and boulevards. And the report outlined a number of different options, and it looked at it not just from an environmental perspective, but from a cost perspective as well, because it can be very costly to constantly be mowing and maintaining grass. Kentucky bluegrass in particular. So this report talked about naturalization, both with and without tree and shrub planting, as well as some permaculture options to explore. And again, it's not just about the carbon emissions and sort of environmental green aspect. It is about saving money as well. And as we move towards a more naturalized approach, as we move towards naturalization, of course, this is not a change that will happen overnight. And I always like to point out that naturalization is not just about letting grass grow. You know, it's not like you just leave a field. There's actually a deliberate process where we ensure that there's the appropriate mix of vegetation. And in a small way, this has kind of been happening over time, even with programs like Roots for Trees that some people might be familiar with. So again, something that I'm really excited about, and you might even know of some examples within the city where you have seen that process of naturalization occurring over the past few years. And interestingly, coming out of this conversation and not included in the report were residential boulevards. So the report really focused on, again, those large boulevards and medians next to large roadways, city-owned large patches of turf, but it didn't talk about kind of the treed boulevards in front of our homes. And as someone who serves Ward Métis, where we have all mature communities, many of which have those residential treed boulevards, I wanted to bring forward a subsequent motion around opportunities to garden on some of those boulevards, whether it is naturalization or going down the permaculture route. Maybe it's just planting wildflowers, having raised beds, or even just clover or an alternative form of ground cover that's less carbon intensive, that takes less mowing. Because right now, people do it informally, but it's not really allowed. And there's no guidelines to say, you know, you have to stay this distance from the tree, suggestions around specific species that may be more tolerable or tolerant rather in that type of area that's close to a roadway that might have, you know, a windrow on it for part of the season. So all of that said, I went and looked at other jurisdictions that have boulevard gardening guidelines, and there are a number of them in Canada. A bunch of jurisdictions have them. In particular, I looked at Victoria, Saskatoon, Regina, Halifax, and I thought, why don't we just implement that here? It seemed like a relatively quick win and a nice way for Edmontonians to take pride in their neighborhoods. It's about the environment. It's about the environmental piece. And yes, there's ecological benefits, but it's also just about beautification and letting people build that sense of place in their neighborhoods. So it's kind of citizen-led activation of underutilized public assets, which I thought would be a nice addition. And it can be done within existing budget, within existing resources. So it was a nice, again, a way to slip that into this conversation. Also, I have to give a shout out to Councillor Paquette for the term boulevardening. I thought it was so catchy, and I think we should somehow work that into the guidelines, like Edmonton's boulevardening guidelines. And I see a few questions. I'm just looking at Allison here. So excited to see this change to be lower impact. Yeah, absolutely. So Allison brings up a good point around, not only is native vegetation pretty and beautiful, but it's really good for carbon sequestration and rainwater reduction, also lowering the cost of drainage infrastructure. So there's definitely ecological services and ecological function that can be wrapped into this as well, which of course is all the more relevant given our extreme weather conditions and climate change as well. Okay, and any other questions that you saw there, Mike? Oh, and I should say, just in terms of timeline, it's a really quick timeline. So administration has already been kind of working on this in the background with EFCL, Edmonton Federation of Community Leagues. And we're looking to get this going for this year's growing season. So hopefully by the end of May, we're going to have the guidelines out and more information public so that people can begin taking part in this. Any questions popping up, Mike? Also, what do you think of boulevardening? It got a lot of traction, I will say. It seems to be pretty popular.
Oh yeah, it's such an awesome way for people to just kind of take kind of a little bit more ownership, especially over that kind of interesting kind of like almost like no person zone between the street and their lawns, and just to have a little bit more even variation besides just grass. I think that's an awesome thing to add to our city for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see one comment in here. I can see some issues potentially with this. So I'd love, if you don't mind, just kind of elaborating on that in the comments. I think that this can also be kind of a learning and iterative process. I would also even encourage, hey, maybe, do you want to put the link for the Saskatchewan boulevard gardening guidelines into the comments? I think it should be in. Yeah, because I think it would be cool for people to see that, because it kind of, lays out some of the concerns that people might have and shows how a city can address them.
Okay, perfect. Either myself or Travis will get those into the
perfect
into the comments there.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and great comment from you, Sushi, as well, just around the neighborliness that can be created through these types of small scale community-led interventions. So I'm looking forward to it. And again, a lot of people, they do it informally right now, but again, making sure that it is fully sort of compliant with what we'd expect on a boulevard, making sure that our wonderful mature trees are protected, but also, giving people that little bit of encouragement that they might need and letting them know that this is actually something that we would encourage. So I'll stop there. And I see a question around, would there be height guidelines on plants? Yes, that would be included. Almost all of the existing boulevard gardening guidelines that I've seen do have restrictions on height. And part of that is just to make sure that, the street is kept safe and that there's nothing blocking the view of drivers in the neighborhood. Great. So I'll keep watching the comments, but I'm going to move on, just looking at the time. So the next one that I wanted to talk about is the Edmonton Strathcona County footbridge. Now, some of you might be familiar with this if you are, a River Valley enthusiast, a hiker, a biker, on the kind of northeast side of Edmonton. You can see it on the map here. There's this fantastic trail, the Northeast Trail. It is paved. It's a shared use path. It winds right alongside the river valley, and it goes kind of up to the quarry, if you know where that is, the quarry golf course. And the Edmonton Strathcona County footbridge would actually complete this trail over to Strathcona County. So I'm really excited about the approval of this footbridge. Right now, you can go basically up to the East End Trail all the way past the Henday, and we've now approved funding for this project. And it's essentially going to link the trail network all the way up to Fort Saskatchewan. So it's going to be a really incredible recreational opportunity for traveling through our river valley. And it's also just going to contribute to kind of a more connected city. It gets us much closer to connecting our trail network from Fort Sask all the way to Devon. And I should say I'm also on the the board of the River Valley Alliance. And that is a huge goal of the RVA, is to ensure that sort of 100-kilometer trail network is fully connected so that Edmontonians and folks within the entire region and visitors to our city can enjoy that resource. Great. I see Kyle is also amped up about the footbridge. It is a fantastic project, I agree. And Meg, let's run through some of the renderings too. Yeah, perfect. So we can see some of them there. Nice. Yeah, so it's a really beautiful design too. I think that it's going to add a lot to the area. And I know I'm going to be out there exploring too. Nice. Cool. Anything else that you've seen, Mike, in the comments?
I have to always remember to unmute myself. Just a lot of people very excited for this footbridge. I know even when I bike from Highlands to, I love biking even past the Anthony Henday Drive. Like that far north along the river. Oh, it's so beautiful. And then past there and stuff. This is just gonna just give you so many more options to get into Strathcona County, kind of go on both sides of the river valley, which will be amazing.
Totally. And I see a question here. I think it was from Kevin around you'd like to get to the trail area and check it out, but not sure how to get there. After this, I can send you, I'll put it in the comments. I'll drop a pin of some of the better access points for the trail, because there's a few points where you can access it. If you're looking to go as close as possible to where the bridge would be, there's actually the quarry, I believe it's a community called the Quarry, right next to the golf course called the Quarry, that you would access it from. Do you know, Mike? Is that right?
I do believe so. Here, let me.
Okay,
Let me try to see if we can get some interactive Google Maps going right
here. Okay, sounds good.
Real quick here. Okay, perfect.
And while you're doing that, I'll answer some more questions. So I see Stephen, is that bridge project shared funding between municipalities? Yes, it is. It is. And shared funding not only with the municipalities, but with the River Valley Alliance as well. Awesome.
So here, sorry, just flipping this back here. So I do believe this is like around where this is going to be crossing. So this is where the Quarry golf course is, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Just comparing pictures, I do believe that's like right in right in there, right?
Yeah, and if you see there's like an access point right there. Yeah, there's like a big kind of ramp that'll take you down. Yeah, exactly.
This is difficult to bike up and down.
It is. It's a bit of a workout if you're on a bike, I will say. But it's a fantastic ride, really beautiful out there. Some gorgeous farmland and kind of agricultural area too. So highly recommend.
There's a bike path that goes all the way around here, which I would definitely recommend.
Okay.
Like all the way also, kind of past the Anthony Henday. Sorry, I'm getting on a tangent.
Chris just came in like with the perfect link. So there's the Northeast Trail in Evan Strathcona County footbridge from Bike Edmonton. So thank you so much for putting that link in, Chris. I would suggest, Kevin, check that out. I'm sure it has like the perfect launch point for you to check out the trails on it. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next item, and it's actually Hawrelak Park. So, as some of you may have heard, Hawrelak Park is going to be undergoing some pretty extensive rehabilitation. So, I've had a number of folks in Ward Métis ask why, well, a few questions. Why is it going to take so long is the biggest question, because it is going to take 3 years. And it's a very fair question. You know, when you're talking about one of our most significant and important parks being closed for 3 years, that is concerning, absolutely. And we did have some opportunities to ask administration why it's going to take so long and the type of work they're doing. And we learned that, you know, it would possibly take about 10 years to do this type of project piecemeal, which would cost significantly more. And that's because the site requires really extensive rehab. So both surface work and underground utility work. And I think, yeah, we do have one of the site maps up right now that shows some of the surface work that's being done as well as underground utilities. One of the challenges with these types of projects is you don't really know what you're getting into until you start digging. So, you know, we can try to predict what we're going to see for a timeline, what that work is going to entail, but until we start the work, we don't have that full and comprehensive understanding. So with all of that in mind, I can see how we arrived at that 3-year timeline. I've also had some questions about festival relocation and where some of our most beloved festivals are going to go. I don't think anything is solidified yet. I personally would love to see them come to Ward Métis. Rundle Park, Borden Park, we've got some great options. If anyone wants to encourage some of the festivals, that would be great. But yeah, I think that finding some good interim solutions, having really good and strong communication with the festivals and Edmontonians as to where those are going to be housed and where those are going to go in the interim will be really critical. And being able to support those festivals to ensure that that transition is smooth. Okay. And then the next one I wanted to touch on before we get into some quite specific neighborhood updates within Ward Métis is actually just the spring sweep. So some of you might be familiar with this. Obviously, spring has sprung, it's beautiful out, but after our winters, there is, of course, a lot of gravel and sand and muck kind of left all over our roads. So over the coming week here, you'll likely be hearing an announcement from the city about our spring sweep. And you can actually view the schedule on the street sweeping map to see when your street is going to be swept in your community. So we can put that link into the chat, or sorry, into the comments section. You can check it out and you can sort of see the details on when you should be helping out and sweeping some of that, you know, leftover muck onto the streets to help us out. Okay, so that was just a quick one. And now we can move into some neighborhood specific updates, unless there's any comments that you wanted to flag, Mike.
There's just a little bit of questions about a little bit of cycle path, or a few cycle paths, and just connecting them all. But I think we'll find the proper documentation stuff with in regards to the two that were brought up, and we'll reply to them potentially a little bit later.
Okay, perfect. And I have to agree. Someone commented about the switchbacks when you're going up that hill. It's pretty intense, I will say. Like your legs are burning, but it's gorgeous, so recommended. Okay, so moving
actually, sorry, even relevant to Hawrelak Park, there is a question about will they allow access to the cycle path south of the Buena Vista Bridge and detour specifically for access? Was there any sort of
Yes. Yeah, so I actually specifically asked about that when we were discussing it with administration, because I wanted to make sure that that access was maintained, because I know that even some people use it as a commuting route too, either walking, biking, and those pathways are going to be maintained, and those access points will be maintained throughout the construction. So that's good. Hopefully that answers it. That was the question, right?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. Wonderful. So yeah, neighborhood specific updates. The first one I wanted to cover that is very recent was the release of the 101 Avenue streetscape concept plan. So that came out just a day ago, maybe 2 days ago. And if you're not familiar with 101 Ave, right now it is quite a wide, very, very auto-centric type street, not really pedestrian friendly, definitely not bike friendly. And a lot of the commercial that faces onto the street, it has, large parking lots in front of it. So just not a super friendly pedestrian environment. So as part of the 101 Ave streetscape, the whole street is being redesigned. They are adding in bike infrastructure, better pedestrian infrastructure, some safer access points for bus stops and public transit. But one thing that has been flagged by community members is that the Wayne Gretzky and 75th Street / Wayne Gretzky and the 101 Ave intersection is quite problematic. So in general, a lot of folks are very excited about 101 Ave and the potential it has to grow into a really thriving main street. And I'm trying to advance that work. But after engagement last year and the concept plan coming out now, there's still those concerns about this particular intersection. So I have already contacted administration about it, and I'm going to be actively working to get a safety audit funded. Right now it is not, but I think that's just such a critical part of this. It's great if you can have safe bike infrastructure for a kilometer, but if it's not actually taking you the entire distance of where you need to go and not getting you to where you need to go in a safe manner, if there's one intersection that's uncomfortable and unsafe, that can discourage people from riding altogether. So again, I want to get this right. I want to, ensure that we're doing this front end work, not regretting it in a few years. So please know that that is a huge priority of mine. As you can see, I think Mike has it up right now. Yeah, great. In particular, it's the slip lanes that are problematic. So as you can see, there would be, I think you can see it, there would be kind of painted bike lanes, but it actually crosses over with the slip lane, which can be quite dangerous. So again, getting that safety audit done will be a really critical part of this conversation. And I want to ensure that that's front and center for our decision making as a council too. So any questions on that one? Doesn't look, oh yeah, what's this one? Yeah, I see. Yeah, someone's like, I like the plan to have bike lanes on each side of the road. However, 75th Street intersection is murderous as designed. It seems ridiculous to have to ask for a safety audit. I hear ya, and I absolutely flagged this as a concern as well. And I'm going to, again, do everything I can to ensure that we end up with a safe, functional, piece of infrastructure that's suitable for all ages and abilities. I just am recalling all of the conversations that I had with Edmontonians and families with young kids or seniors who would tell me, I want to be able to bike more. I would love to be able to, bike to the corner store, bike to the grocery store, go see my friends. Or parents want to let their kids bike to school or, bike to go see their friends. But without that safe infrastructure, it can be such a huge barrier. So again, that safety audit will be critical. And if anyone wants to, send some emails my way around their concern, I'd also be happy to sort of compile that just to know that it is a concern for community members in Ward Métis. Yeah, absolutely agree. Safe infrastructure has to be a priority. Okay. So I'll come back to some of the questions. Okay, and then alley renewal. So switching gears, this was just announced quite recently. I don't know if there's anyone on from Strathern tonight or Beverly, but Strathern and Beverly have been chosen for alley renewal, which is really exciting. The planning and design is currently underway with construction anticipated to start between 2023 and 2025. So some folks may have seen the alleyway renewal that we had in King Edward Park and in Delton over the last few years. So really exciting to see that these two other neighborhoods in Ward Métis are up next in line. And when it comes to our alleyways and our laneways in general, I received more than a few complaints about the quality of our drainage in particular in our alleyways. And honestly, I've seen some real doozies in terms of problematic drainage. There were some photos floating around of some folks like canoeing in their laneways. And yeah, there's both some concerns around our snow and ice management there, but also just the state of our laneways and the infrastructure that's lacking. So at the end of the day, when we think back to when these alleyways and when these laneways were first built, the city actually didn't put much thought towards their renewal and their repair. So they've been deteriorating really for decades at this point. And we do now have a program in place that over the next 20 years will virtually see all of our mature alleyways renewed. So obviously we can't do them all at once, but it's about $20 million per year for a total of $400 million over the total length of the project. And that's our alley renewal program. And just a heads up for folks who are Beverly in the house, great. Sorry, I see someone's from Beverly, you must be excited. For folks who are in Strathern, I just wanted to highlight that there will be an engagement session on April 19th. If you'd like to attend, there's also a survey that's up online right now that's going until the end of the month. So please, if you're interested and you want to share your feedback around alley renewal, head on over there. And I do have to say, I'm all about the shout outs, but shout out to Councillor Knack in particular on alleyway renewal. He was a huge driving force behind getting that sustainable program in place so that we can have that renewed infrastructure and really ensuring we're thinking about the entire life cycle of our mature neighborhoods and the infrastructure that we rely on. Okay. So I've got a few minutes left. I'm going to jump to, and I'm going to leave a little bit of time for questions. And if anyone wants to talk about anything in particular, a few things I wanted to flag that are coming up.
Actually, so, real quick, there is just a comment from Constance about will Ashley talk crime tonight. If you have a specific question or if there is a specific thing, because we don't necessarily know what portion of the ward you live in, and especially there's a variety of issues that you could be referring to. So if you do have a specific kind of question, please feel free to definitely ask that. But yeah,
absolutely. And that's a good segue actually, because the next thing I was going to talk about was problem properties and the crime and fires and arson that have been associated with those types of properties. So yeah, again, as Mike said, if there's a particular issue you want to chat about, happy to dive into it. Just let us know in the chat. But problem properties. So as a lot of you likely know, on the north side of Ward Métis in particular, near the Alberta Ave area, there has been just a rash of fires, growing concern around problem properties in particular. And when we talk problem properties, I'm talking about vacant derelict structures, often boarded up for years on end. And back in December, when I was sort of newly elected, the very first motion I brought forward was around problem properties. This is an urgent issue. There have been, folks whose homes have been literally burned down, or properties next to them have burned down and collapsed onto their homes. It's really a terrible situation. So within that motion, which is coming back on April 11th, I asked for additional information on enforcement measures. I asked for additional information on financial penalties. How can we use tax subclasses to make sure that these types of properties are penalized and not rewarded? As well as some additional information around how we can speed up the redevelopment of them. Is there a way to, not only financially penalize these types of properties, but have a development structure in place that ensures there's turnover and these properties are actually adding to the neighborhood instead of weighing us down. So please, stay tuned for that one. I know that if there's anyone in the kind of Alberta Avenue, Parkdale, Cromdale area, if you are interested in actually coming and speaking on April 11th, please feel free to contact our office as well. One thing that I think can be really powerful is actually hearing from community members at our committee meetings and hearing your firsthand experience and your, stories of how this has affected you in your neighborhood. So flagging that one. Looking at the time, one other that I'm just quickly going to mention is the infill compliance report that's coming forward. And I know that this came up on a pretty regular basis in my door knocking experience. So a report is coming back that essentially looks at how good our city's been doing, how good development has been in achieving our infill goals. And in particular, I'm interested in having a conversation about additional enforcement measures for, lack of a better word, but kind of bad infill builders who aren't being good neighbors. You know, we absolutely do need to see more infill in our neighborhoods, but we want to see good infill. We want to see responsible infill practices. We want to see responsible neighborly builders, and ensuring that we are, you know, kind of cracking down on the bad builders so that good builders can be in our city is what I would like to see. Because I've heard many stories of builders who have, you know, left materials out on the front lawn for days on end, months on end, at sometimes properties where there's been damage to the neighboring property. Again, not really acceptable. We have to have a better process in place. So please stay tuned for that as well. And then the last one I'll end on, I know we've talked about this in the past, but snow and ice control, we are finally going to be discussing that at length on April 25th. So I have been collecting everybody's feedback, all of your input. I just want to thank everyone who has sent in their feedback throughout the winter. It's not just about, you know, windrows, but it's about our approach to blading. It's about our approach to drainage. It's our approach to sidewalk clearing and accessibility. There's a huge conversation to be had there, and I'm really looking forward to that one. So with the last few minutes here, I do see a bunch of comments coming in right at the last minute. But Mike, is there any that you want to jump on?
Perfect. So just to kind of like talk a little bit of our plans even going forward for these upcoming community conversations, we did set in stone the next well, sorry, 4, now it's 3 after this one. Just as a little reminder and just to make sure that we put that in here, it is most likely that we're going to stick with an online approach for these, but we are also potentially in the works to do kind of like a more outdoor summer kind of get together, which we'll like watch Ashley's socials and stuff for that. Just to George's points about these being accessible and stuff like that. We try to make sure that we make it as accessible as possible for a whole slew of different people. Like we try to go over and above with the subtitles and stuff, and we have even a better subtitle program than that Facebook even allows, to just make sure that people can be just kind of accessing this wherever they are. But I know that one of the barriers that we are trying to deal with is how to get interaction on these live streams from people who might potentially not have a Facebook account. So right now everybody in the comments has a Facebook account, but we're trying to potentially get them interacting, or get people able to interact with the stream that potentially might not have a Facebook account. Right now the stream is set up so that people without a Facebook account can tune into the stream, as well as we do have the replays going both on here and on our YouTube channel, which is nicely accessible on ashleysalvador.com/conversations. So just a quick note and a little bit going forward on that.
Mike's always so good with like the necessary information at the end. I always forget. I just want to keep talking, but thank you for saying that. And I just see a few I want to address in the comments. There was one from Kevin around shelters at Commonwealth Stadium. I actually had that on my list, but we were short on time, so we didn't cover it. But so the Spectrum, there's 2. So Spectrum is closed as of March 8th, and Commonwealth Shelter actually closed March 31st. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. So there has been some changes there. And I think I saw a few more. I can't see the full list for some reason right now, Mike, but was there another one? Another comment?
Oh, I just wanted to touch on too, because it was Kevin and Constance that lived in Parkdale, Cromdale there. If you do have any extra questions or something, feel free to reach out to our office, like ashley.salvador@edmonton.ca. If there are more detailed pressing concerns and stuff, or if you do even want more information again about speaking on the 11th, and just even what that problem property report has in it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think I saw one from Yasushi around some of the folks who are doing work on the ground in the Alberta Ave community around problem properties. And I am connected with everyone that you mentioned in your comment. So thank you for highlighting that. Yeah, and I guess one thing that, while we've still got some people here, I would be curious. We were chatting before we went live, and I was talking to Mike about whether or not we want to continue kind of providing you with a real breadth of content, or whether you prefer deep dives into one or two topics. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts in the comments if you want to share any of that. You know, we're very happy to tweak these conversations as we go, just so that, again, we're giving you the information that you need, giving you the information that you want. So please feel free, any feedback, suggestions, or improvements that you think we should make, let us know. Great.
Perfect.
Well, with that, I think we will wrap it up. We've been here for an hour. Oh, what's up with? Okay, I'm sorry. I saw another good question from Jason here. I'll stick around. Let's stick around for a few more minutes, Mike.
Yeah.
But this will end the formal evening of the community conversation. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. I really appreciate you joining us. And yeah, we'll, like I say, stick around, but feel free to reach us via email at any point, and we'll see you next month for the community convo. Thanks, everyone. So yeah, I saw a question around the ACT Center over in Rundle, and absolutely, I share your concern about the delays there. I have reached out to admin just to get a better understanding of why exactly it has been delayed. I know that people have been waiting for that one for a while. So please, stay tuned. I will be posting about that. I've had a few people ask me publicly over social media what the delay is caused by. So I'm hoping to get an answer by the end of the week, and hoping to share that with everyone. But I will say, if you're not familiar with the Building Edmonton website, if you go to Building Edmonton, I think it's buildingedmonton.ca, it shows all of our capital projects, all of our rehabilitation projects in the entire city, and it shows timelines associated with those. So that would be kind of a useful tool if you're looking to stay updated on that. Okay. And let's see. Yeah, thanks so much for the feedback, everyone. Deep dive or overview. Some people appreciate this format. Some people would like a bit more of a deep dive. Yeah, maybe we could do kind of a rotation. We also had our first guest on last time. We had someone from Homeward Trust, where we were able to talk about the conversion of the Coliseum Inn into supportive housing. So we might continue having some guests on occasionally where we want to do deeper dives. Okay. Well, I'm going to close out for tonight, everybody, but I will stick around to do some comments after this, but we're going to sign off the live video. Thank you so much for coming. Have a lovely evening. Take care.